Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're plunging into some really fascinating research, looking at what could be a blueprint for a sustainable energy future, especially for a region facing big challenges.
That's right.
Our focus is a specific study titled, Setting the Pace for a Sustainable Energy Transition in Central Africa, the Case of Cameroon. And this isn't just, abstract theory. It lays out a pretty detailed roadmap for how Cameroon could actually hit 100% renewable energy by 2050.
And it's a crucial case study, potentially, for the whole of Central Africa.
Exactly.
And the timing couldn't be more critical, really. We've got the Paris Agreement's 1.5-degree target, this global push towards net zero.
Right.
Understanding the actual techno-economics, the nuts and bolts of how sustainable energy systems work on the ground, it's vital. This study gives us a concrete pathway.
So that's our mission for this deep dive. Pull out the key insights for this study, look at its optimal pathways, and figure out what it really means for clean, affordable, reliable energy, not just in Cameroon, but beyond.
Let's do it.
Okay, so let's start with the basics. What's the energy situation right now in Central Africa?
Yeah.
And why Cameroon? Why pick Cameroon as the starting point for this study?
Well, Central Africa first. We're talking about 9 countries here. Angola, DRC are big ones. Population was around 180 million back in 2020.
Okay.
But that's projected to shoot up to 383 million by 2050, more than double.
Wow.
And here's the kicker. Central Africa has the lowest electricity access rate on the continent, just 26% in 2018.
26%, that's incredibly low.
It really is. Compare that to West Africa at 53%, Southern Africa at 48%. They also have the least installed power generation infrastructure, and importantly, very few specific policies pushing for sustainable energy.
Okay, that paints a challenging picture. So given those challenges across the region, what makes Cameroon stand out? Why did the researchers focus there?
That's a key point. Cameroon is literally the only country in the entire region that actually has specific regulations and financial incentives aimed at boosting renewable energy development.
The only one.
The only one.
Yeah.
So while the policies might still be developing, they have something in place. It makes Cameroon a sort of natural test case, a potential leader for the rest of Central Africa.
Right, a place to start where there's at least some policy framework. So what does the energy mix look like now? What are people actually using for energy in Cameroon in the region?
It's heavily dominated by traditional biomass, wood, charcoal, that sort of thing.
Okay.
That makes up 71% of the total primary energy supply. That's all energy use in Cameroon. And for Central Africa overall, it's even higher, about 85%.
85% biomass, wow.
But when you look just at electricity generation capacity, it's a different story. Hydropower is dominant. About 76% of Central Africa's installed power capacity comes from hydro.
So lots of biomass for general energy, lots of hydro for electricity.
Pretty much. Historically, not much focus on solar or wind.
Now, Cameroon has ambitions, right? They want to be an emergent economy by 2035. They have plans like the Energy Sector Development Plan, PDSE, and a Renewable Energy Master Plan, REMP. What's the focus in those existing plans? Still hydro.
Yeah, overwhelmingly. The study notes these plans are principally oriented towards developing hydropower and just extending the existing grid networks.
So not much focus on other renewables.
Very little attention, the study says, given to solar, wind, or even more modern bioenergy in the government's official mix. It's heavily leaning on hydro for the future.
But relying so heavily on hydropower, this study points out some real problems with that approach, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. First, like many large hydro projects globally, the ones in Cameroon often face significant cost overruns and big delays in their schedules.
I know your story.
Yeah. And maybe more critically, these big centralized hydro projects often don't effectively reach rural communities. Remember, rural electricity access is only about 14%.
Just 14%.
And then there's the climate change issue. Hydropower is vulnerable to changes in rainfall patterns, droughts.
Right.
These variations can cause shortfalls in generation, leading to power outages. The study estimates these outages have cost Cameroon around 5% of its GDP growth per year. That's huge.
5% of GDP growth lost. That's a massive economic impact, hitting businesses and households hard.
Definitely.
Okay, so that sets the scene. Hydro reliance has issues. Now, this study used a pretty sophisticated tool, right? The LUT Energy System Transition Model. Can you tell us a bit about how it works and what features it explored for Cameroon?
Sure. It's basically a powerful computer model, a linear optimization model. It maps out the entire energy system, power, heat, transport. hour by hour, all the way to 2050.
Hour by hour?
Yeah, it's very detailed. The researchers looked at 6 different scenarios, but we'll focus on the 3 main ones for this discussion.
Okay.
First, there's the best policy scenario, BS. This is the really ambitious one, aims for 100% renewables, net zero emissions by 2050, fully aligned with the Paris Agreement goals.
The ideal path, basically.
Right. Then you have the INDC scenario. This is based on Cameroon's current official climate pledges, aiming for a 32% greenhouse gas cut by 2035 compared to 2010 levels.
Okay, more modest.
And finally, the current policy scenario, CPS. This pretty much reflects what would happen if Cameroon just continues with its existing targets and plans, sort of the business as usual trajectory.
Got it. So 3 different levels of ambition. What's the core question the model tries to answer by comparing these?
Well, it really boils down to this. What is the optimal, least cost pathway for Cameroon to reach a fully sustainable energy system? The model is designed to find the cheapest way to meet energy demand while hitting those policy and sustainability targets.
These costs, that's crucial. So what does the model find? What did that best policy scenario, the 100% renewable net zero path, actually look like for Cameroon's energy future?
Okay, here's the headline finding, and it's a big one. The optimal, least cost technology picks for Cameroon to get to a fully sustainable net zero system by 2050. It's dominated by solar PV.
Solar. It's dominant.
We're talking 86% of the energy coming from solar PV.
86%. Wow, that is a huge shift from the current hydro focus.
It really is. Hydropower drops to just 8% in this optimal mix, and bioenergy makes up the remaining 5%. It completely flips the script.
Okay, 86% solar. That's the big takeaway. What does this mean for overall energy demand? Does going fully renewable mean using more energy?
That's another fascinating finding. No, actually. The best policy scenario results in a lower total primary energy demand by 2050, about 152 terawatt hours.
Lower demand, how?
Compared to 160 TWh in the INDC scenario and a 173 TWh in the current policy scenario. The reason is what the study calls massive electrification.
Electrification drives efficiency.
Exactly. When you electrify heating, transport, industry, electric technologies are just way more efficient than burning biomass or fossil fuels, so you need less primary energy overall to get the same services. In the BPS, electricity makes up about 83% of total energy demand by 2050. It becomes a highly efficient system.
So, cleaner and more efficient. Okay, let's dig into that 86% solar PV. What kind of solar are we talking about here? Rooftop. Big solar farms. And how different is this from the government's current plans?
Right, so in the BPS, the total installed power capacity grows massively from about 1.8 gigawatts in 2020 to 64 gigawatts in 2050.
Huge growth.
Huge. And solar PV provides almost all of that new capacity, reaching 60 gigawatts. Now, within that 60 gigawatt, about 78% comes from utility-scale PV, with single-axis tracking. These are the panels that follow the sun.
Okay, big solar farms.
Yeah. But also, significantly, about 15% comes from PV prosumers. That's solar on homes, businesses, industrial sites, people generating their own power.
Decentralized generation, too.
Exactly. And this picture is dramatically different from the other scenarios. In the INDC and CPS, hydropower stays dominant, around 66-68% of capacity, and solar share is much smaller, only 38-49%.
So the BPS isn't just more solar, it's a fundamentally different system structure.
Precisely. The study puts it nicely. The emergence of solar PV as the prime source steers the pathway towards an efficient, highly decentralized, flexible, and demand-driven system.
Decentralized, flexible, demand-driven. And you mentioned earlier the vulnerabilities of hydropower, especially with climate change.
Yes, that's a critical point. Hydropower relies on consistent rainfall, which climate change makes less predictable. Droughts mean less power,
Leading to those costly outages.
right. Solar, on the other hand, is much less susceptible than hydropower to climate change, according to the study. Sunshine is generally more reliable day to day, year to year, than rainfall patterns in a changing climate. It adds resilience.
That makes sense.
Right.
Okay, so we've got a solar-dominated power sector. But energy isn't just electricity. What about heating and transport? How does the best policy scenario transform those?
Good question. They're crucial. For heating, the BPS sees a major shift. By 2050, electric heating and efficient heat pumps supply about 69% of the heat demand. Sustainable biomass covers most of the rest, around 30%.
So getting away from inefficient biomass burning for cooking and heating.
Exactly. Compare that to the INDC-CPS scenarios where traditional biomass use stays really high, around 86%, along with fossil fuels. So big health and environmental benefits in the BPS heat sector.
And transport, that's usually a tough nut to crack.
Yeah, transport sees a complete defossilization starting around 2030 in the BPS. It means moving to electric vehicles, battery electric, plug-in hybrids, and also fuel cell electric vehicles, likely using green hydrogen.
Green hydrogen,
Yeah.
not from renewable electricity.
Precisely. And because electric drivetrains are so much more efficient than internal combustion engines, you actually see a reduction in the overall energy needed for transport compared to the other scenarios, which stick mainly with gasoline and diesel.
More efficiency gains. Okay, so you have the system dominated by solar, which is variable. The sun isn't always shining. How does the BPS manage that? How do you keep the energy flowing 2047? Flexibility must be key.
Absolutely critical. And storage is the first big part of that flexibility puzzle. The BPS requires a massive amount of battery storage. We're talking an annual output from batteries of 23.5 terawatt hours by 2050.
23.5 TWh from batteries alone.
Yeah, that's 16 to 20 times more battery output than needed in the INDC or CPS scenarios. It just highlights how essential storage becomes when you have high levels of variable renewables like solar.
Okay, huge batteries for electricity. What about storing energy for heat or making fuels?
Similar story there. You need significant heat storage, primarily in the form of gas storage, think hydrogen or synthetic methane made from renewables. Again, the BPS needs 16 to 40 times more gas storage output than the other scenarios.
Hydrogen and synthetic methane as storage.
Right. And this links to what's called sector coupling using power to X or PTX technologies.
Power to X. Explain that a bit.
It basically means using surplus renewable electricity when the sun is shining really brightly, for example, to create other energy carriers. So electrolyzers use electricity to split water into hydrogen.
Green hydrogen.
Exactly. And then you can use that hydrogen directly or combine it with captured CO2 to make synthetic methane or even liquid fuels using processes like Fischer-Tropsch. These synthetic fuels are vital for sectors that are hard to electrify directly, like aviation or shipping.
So you're converting electricity into storable, transportable fuels.
Precisely. The study even mentions a battery-to-PTG phenomenon, batteries charging up gas storage systems during sunny periods. It's all about integrating the different parts of the energy system.
Very smart integration. And what about the electricity grid itself? Does this distributed solar change how the grid operates?
It does. With lots of distributed solar, like rooftop PV and local storage, there's much less reliance on the main central grid, especially at night. Power is generated and used more locally.
Which could mean less need for expensive long-distance transmission lines.
Potentially, yes. It encourages a smarter, more intelligent distribution grid. And one other flexibility tool is curtailment. Sometimes you might just have to deliberately reduce output from solar or wind if there's too much power and not enough demand or storage available. It's like a safety valve.
Okay, so storage, synthetic fuels, smart grids, even curtailment. A whole toolkit for flexibility. Now, the really big question, the cost. You said the BPS aims for the least cost. Does a 100% renewable system actually end up being cheaper?
This is probably the most striking finding. Yes, significantly cheaper. Let's look at the total annual system cost in 2050. For the BPS, it's projected to be 4.1 billion euros.
Okay, 4.1 billion, how does that compare?
The INDC scenario costs 6.7 billion euros annually by 2050, and the CPS costs 8.6 billion.
Wow. So the 100% renewable path is 39 to 52% cheaper per year by 2050?
Exactly. The main reason is you eliminate fuel costs, no more importing expensive fossil fuels, and you avoid carbon emission costs.
That's huge annual savings. What about the total cost over the whole period, from now to 2050?
The BPS is cheaper there, too. The cumulative cost from 2020 to 2050 for the BPS is about 21 billion euros. That's compared to 25 billion for the INDC and 30 billion for the CPS.
So 17 to 32% cheaper overall. That challenges the idea that going green is always more expensive.
It completely turns it on its head, at least in this context, and it gets even better when you look at the cost of energy itself. The levelized cost of energy, or LCOE.
Right, the cost per unit of energy produced.
For the whole energy system, the LCOE in the BPS drops dramatically, from 72 euros per megawatt hour in 2020 down to 41 euros in 2050. That's 38 to 53% lower than the other scenarios by 2050.
Cheaper energy across the board.
And for electricity specifically, it's even more dramatic. The LCOE for power in the BPS plummets to just 24 euros per megawatt hour by 2050.
24 euros. That's incredibly cheap electricity.
It's a 66% reduction from 2020 levels, and it's 1.3 to 3 times cheaper than the electricity costs in the INDC and CPS scenarios by 2050.
And emissions.
The BPS achieves net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050, meeting the Paris goals. The other two scenarios, they still have substantial emissions, 13.6 and 21.4 million tons of CO2 equivalent, respectively, mostly from transport.
So the BPS is cleaner, more efficient, and significantly cheaper. It seems like a clear winner. This study basically says Cameroon's current path is not only less sustainable, but way more expensive, right?
That's the core message. It's fascinating, as the study points out, that even the INDC scenario, which has some ambition, and the government's own renewable energy master plan, they don't fully get rid of fossil fuels, and they end up being much more costly. They actually strain the affordability aspect of Sustainable Development Goal 7.
SDG 7, clean and affordable energy for all. So let's connect this back to the listener. Why should people, maybe even outside Central Africa, care about Cameroon's energy choices based on this study? What are the wider implications?
Well, first, it directly impacts SDG 7. Remember those stark figures. 75% of Cameroonians lack clean cooking, 17 million rely on biomass, rural electricity access is only 14%.
Right, the human dimension is critical.
Exactly. And those frequent power cuts hit everyone. A solar-dominated system, especially with its decentralized potential, is described as practical and timely for rural areas, where extending the main grid is just too expensive.
So solars can reach people the grid hasn't.
Yes. And as the costs of solar panels and batteries keep falling, these systems become more affordable for ordinary people, both in cities and rural areas. This also means huge health benefits by replacing smoky biomass stoves.
Jobs.
The study suggests significant potential for job creation in the renewable sector, similar to what's been seen elsewhere in sub-Saharan Africa. So it hits multiple development goals.
Okay, so the benefits are clear. Cost, access, health, jobs, climate. What are the concrete policy recommendations coming out of this deep dive? What should Cameroon's leaders do now?
The study is very direct. Recommendation 1, prioritize solar PV as the main energy source, moving away from the over-reliance on hydro.
Shift the focus.
2, revise the existing government energy plans, the REMP, the PDER, the DSCE, to align with this least-cost, solar-led pathway.
Update the official strategy.
3, the relevant institutions, the Energy Ministry, MINI, the Rural Electrification Agency, AER, the regulator, ARCEL, need to develop clear roadmaps to implement these low-cost solar, battery, and sector coupling technologies.
Put practical plans in place.
And finally, reconsider building more large hydropower plants, given their climate risks, cost issues, and delays. The study essentially argues that the future is solar, not hydro.
A clear call for a strategic pivot.
And the study concludes quite powerfully that a 100% renewable system based on this model presents no major technical nor economic barriers for Cameroon. The main missing ingredient, fervent political will and enabling policies.
Political will, that's often the key. So wrapping up this deep dive into setting the pace for a sustainable energy transition in Central Africa, the case of Cameroon, the message seems incredibly clear and potentially transformative.
It really is.
The best path forward for Cameroon, cheaper, cleaner, better for development, is one dominated by solar PV, supported by storage and smart integration. It tackles emissions, cost, and energy access all at once.
And importantly, because the conditions are similar, these findings offer a reliable reference for guiding policy decisions across the whole Central African region. Other countries can learn from this potential pathway.
Absolutely. It suggests the future of energy in Central Africa could be incredibly bright, quite literally powered by the sun. Which leaves us with a thought for you, our listeners. What long-held assumptions about energy infrastructure and development in your own country or region might be overdue for a similar, critical re-examination based on the falling costs and rising potential of renewables?
A great question to ponder.
Thank you for joining us on the Deep Dive. We hope you'll continue exploring these vital energy transition topics.